Everything is good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there's somebody that is got their, something's coming through. Okay, let me just mute, make sure everybody's muted. 'Cause I think, okay. Just one moment, mute up here. Okay. So we're ready to hear whatever you'd like to share. I hope you're recovered from your falls.
I am. I'm recovered quite well so far. Yes, thank you. Nothing too serious, but when you get older, then those little accidents weigh a little more heavily. But I'm fine, and everything's fine here at Audaria. Here, it's most of this tomorrow, so we're celebrating it online tomorrow with some discussion at the same time. Otherwise, we're just taking questions today, right? So let's go ahead and
yes, Pranada, you want to ask your question?
Hare Krishna. Yes, Swami, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about something you've been mentioning, like briefly, in different conversations over the, I would say, like, I don't know, some months or a year. Specifically, I'm thinking about how you said that when we enter the lila, then our parents are manifestations of our bhava. And at other times you've said things like, in responding to questions about Abhimanyu or making comments about Chandravali, you've used terms that I can't remember right now, but I think sometimes you've said it's almost like they're props in the lila. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about these little, like, seems like hints that you're dropping about the lila and persons in the lila. In other words, like if our parents are manifested from our bhava, are they there, or are we just feeling that they're there?
Well, I think that there are a number of ways in which we can try to talk about the nature of the Paravyom, Lila, and so forth, particularly the aprakat, the unmanifest Lila, that leaves something to be desired for the rational mind, if you will, which is good to know that there is more than what fits between our ears. And it's worthy of our regard and reasoning in support of, even as it, as I say, it transcends the limits of reasoning. And that's just a good point to make. I know that you're all aware of that point, but it's a good point to make. And it may help us when we hear different devotees speak about these topics in slightly different ways, in which they're trying to put into words and reasonable thought, explanations, the goings on, the workings, the dynamics of that realm, if you will. But more precisely, in answer to your particular question, there is a feature or a factor or an aspect of liberated life, and that is called sakti-sankalpa. So it means that, for example, Krishna's sakti-sankalpa, whatever he desires happens, right? That's the real example of free will, if you will. here in the material world, we speak of free will. There's arguments about free will and whatnot. But even if we accept as we do that we have an element of will, and will is free of sorts, still it's obvious that it's not free in all respects. If if you jump off a building and you will not to fall to the ground, you will. So there's more to it, again, if you will. But Krishna's not like that. So whatever he wills happens. He wills to experience friendship, and there's Balaram, for example. So that said, yes, we do have will, and in an element of freedom, if you and that is covered largely by the influence of material nature. And the more we come under the influence of the svarupa-sakti, which is moving according to the will of Krishna in relation to his own inner life, then the more our will and all that we are comes to the fore, comes to the surface. When we express our will as a liberated being, it is within the jurisdiction of the svarupa-sakti. That means, another way of saying that is, that means it's completely one with Krishna's will, which is unlimitedly varied in terms of his desire to taste. There's no limit to his tasting. So he has, you can say, many forms, which we would call spiritual bodies, and associates and whatnot, that are all expansions of his own form through which he fulfills his unlimited or various desires to taste love. So when the jiva becomes liberated in the context of bhakti, well, he started, or she started from the very beginning with a desire to become an associate of Krishna in the lila and so forth. So that will be fulfilled in due course, and that will be, again, one with Krishna's will. So it'll be fulfilled. So if all of Krishna's desires are fulfilled and your desires are one with his, then your desires will be fulfilled. So in that sense, then, the liberated jiva is also considered to be sadhya sankalpa, to have this quality. Now, he or she only desires to serve Krishna, and all of Krishna's desires are fulfilled, and so on, as I'm saying. So all the desires are fulfilled. So, with regard to the nature of that bhava, let's say it's Sakya bhava or Madhurya bhava that the devotee attains, then that sadhya sankalpa that liberated will expressed out of that particular bhava can include within it family members, friends, let's say, well, relative to your question, parents, and so forth. So your question was, well, do they really exist, or is it just, something that you made up? Kind of is kind of what you're saying, but it's what's made up there is really exists, if you will. It's hard to say that. I like to think of the spiritual body, this siddha that one will attain as an expression of eternal bhavas. So the bhavas are existing, madhurya bhavas existing, sakya bhavas existing, vatsalya bhavas eternally existing, and they're fully expressing themselves in Krishna's abode of Goloka in particular. And that bhava is always kind of expressing itself in newer and newer ways. So in the depths of the being of the Godhead, our sarup lies, so to speak, or a form that is the expression of our prema, but it may not be manifest. Now it may be manifest, but it may be not manifest at the same time relative to the angle of vision. But again, we're just trying to talk about something that we say is eternal, but you're attaining it. So there's a problem with language there and thought. But anyway, I don't mean to complicate the issue, but yes, certainly that. Just let me give you an example. In terms of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's perspective, that the devotee is practicing. The devotee develops some sense of direction, taste, and that taste is well informed with scriptural the teachings and so forth. And so he or she, in Bhaktivinoda's example, is asked by the guru, what is you've been studying, you've been reading the Bhagavatam, you've been chanting, what's your, affinity? And then they express it, and then he says yes, and then there's some back and forth and so forth. The will there of the developing sadhaka under further and further, greater and greater influence of the svarupa-sakti is expressing itself, and Gurudev is editing or saying yes, that fits within the parameters of rasa tattva, so you can count on that. So, and the point I'm making is there is some expression of the will of the advanced devotee. It has some is an element of part of the determining factor of his or her attainment, even when that which attained is eternal. So in that sense, it's sometimes thought of as there but unmanifest, or within the bhav of that particular bhav, but hasn't expressed itself. I like to think like this because, for example, we say prema of Radha is full, but it's ever expanding. At one point, Lakshmi had never seen Narasingha, this face of Narayan, her husband. But that face is eternal. So your today is eternal, but it's waiting to manifest, so to speak, when you unite with that svarupa-sakti in love. So, given the role of the will, and this is now under the influence of the svarupa-sakti, yes, one can create, so to speak, or the parents, so to speak, will be an expression of the bhav. And this is nicely explained in in the Nimbarka commentary on Vedanta Sutra, on the last chapter, the last the very last section of the last chapter of Vedanta Sutra, which there are 4, and there are divisions within it. So Baladev speaks about it there in his commentary. Baladev Bruce, and more generally by way of saying that which one will attain is, determined by the sadhana from the very onset of the sadhana. Narottam has said similar. What you attain will correspond with what you practice, and so forth and so on. But there in the commentary, there are 2 commentaries. I believe there's Nimbarka's commentary itself, which is very terse, and then there is a commentary of the leading disciple of his, Srinivas, and it unpacks the commentary of Nimbarka. And you might wonder why I'm referring to a commentary from Lila Sampradaya, but we don't disagree with what they're saying there, or in many places as well. The Nimbarkis, they're also Ragmarg Sampradaya. We have some disagreements. We're our own Sampradaya, but there's a lot of similarity. After all, our tattva, our metaphysic is called the Chinti Beta Beta. Theirs is called Beta Beta. So it's a Beta Beta perspective. But anyway, there, Srinivas says, and the liberated soul can create his own parents, and so on and so forth. Particularly mentions that. I was just looking at that just yesterday, as a matter of fact. So interesting that you would bring it up. But the idea is that the satya sankalpa, that when one's wish is totally in conformity with the will of Bhagavan, being as it is under the influence of or arising out of the svarupa-sakti, then it will be fulfilled. And parents exist then in that case, just like your Siddhadeha does, your body. Now there are other ways that this is talked about too. In Dhyan Chandra Goswami's, I think it's Gaur Govinda, I forget the name of it. He is like a
Smarta-padati?
Yeah. He mentions there that the parents' names will be made up of I think he said the first and the last syllable of the initiated name given. And it's a little bit of a handbook on of sorts on raganuga bhakti, mostly consisting of verses, mantras, verses, gayatris, and so forth, to apply, to chant, and so forth. But yeah, he mentions that there, which is kind of curious. Doesn't go into detail. That seems anyway to indicate that the initiating guru, in the context of confirming or helping the disciple have a nishta, a fixed conviction as to his or her ideal, that in the context of doing that, which I explained how Bhaktivinoda Thakur did it, may be done differently in other lineages and so forth. There's room for that, but again, it's something that is arising in conjunction with, as extensions of the very bhava that you attain, that in a limited way, if you will, is spoken of as the siddha. So you think, for example, of a body, person, a person is part of a family. Their body is part of the family. There's a whole to your personhood. I am so and so. Well, whose son and daughter are you? And so forth. That's part of you. So it's in that sense in which I refer to that, and I've given some references to help us appreciate it. But you look at it like the question is, where does your personal bhava within a particular bhava, where does it end? And then beyond that, other people's bhavas and so forth are going on that you're interacting with, and so on and so forth. That would be more the interesting kind of question. In other words, you thought it ended with a body. I get a body, that's my bhava. Now it's extending to include parents as well. Where does it end? I can't tell you exactly where it ends, and it's somewhat individual at the same time, and at the same time, and this is kind of your question, if I understood it correctly, it's existing. Think of it again, just like your sarup. In different ways has been talked about. Some say, well, there's like paintings, on the walls. They're all sarups and waiting to be given to you to correspond with the bhakti that you have, and so forth, and that constitutes all you can be. And I talk about it a little differently, as I said, as the bhava is eternally expressing itself in different ways, and one correspond with the cultivation of your bhakti in conjunction with your will, and that will is one with Krishna's will. All of the devotees in Vrindavan, their will is one with Krishna, and they're all doing different things, and they're all desiring different things. So, such is the nature of Krishna. Does that help? I know it's kind of a long, drawn-out response, but
Yes, it helps. I think that I'm still having ideas that are forming, trying to understand some of the things you've said at other times, but I'll bring them up if they.
yeah, I didn't
remain.
respond. You said something about Chandravali. I didn't hear that part.
Well, because in questions regarding well, you've said things like Chandravali doesn't seem like a whole person, and
From a psychological point of view,
okay.
Modern psychology, people would say something like that.
And then in one question about Abhimanyu, it's well, and we hear in Gopal Champu how this is all, it's not real that Radharani is married to Abhimanyu, and Abhimanyu is there.
Again, these things are talked about in different ways. So some devotees say that Abhimanyu is a particular expansion of Krishna. Some say it's just like a rumor that he exists. That doesn't. These are the different ways of trying to talk about it, but it's a particular, particular bhav. Chandravali is a particular bhav. If you take Radharani and you take something out of her and make it into a whole, entity, this is Chandravali, or other gopis, and so forth. But yeah, these things are there's it's human-like and so forth, but it's very different. So if you look at it through the lens of modern psychology, Chandravali would look like, you should get out of there, you're in a bad relationship, and the same might be said for Radharani, for that matter, too, for modern psychology. But that only goes so far. Therefore, we say human-like, and the like is as important as the human, if not more, in terms of helping us to understand it and enter into the humanness of it, if you will. Okay, well, so much for that one. Glad it was a little bit helpful.
Okay, I'll just let you know that there's 6 more questions.
Okay, it did take a long time on that,
But
but
no, it was fine. It was wonderful. So Sadhvi.
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 Namaste, Guru Maharaj. You hear me?
I do. I see you too. You
Yes.
can't hide.
My question is about a sadhaka is taking shelter of svarupa-sakti gradually, but still somehow the karma is still working. So how exactly these two energies are working on sadhaka simultaneously, and how Maya Shakti is stopping the soul from entering the lila? I was just wondering about this specific how it works.
Well, there are different ways in which acharyas have discussed the influence of karma on a sadhaka. And some, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, for example, tends to say, as soon as you take a bhakti, your karma's gone. Now, it doesn't feel like that to many devotees, perhaps. But Jiva Goswami has given an example that maybe is more practical. He says that if you take a rope or a string, let's say a string, and a fuse, like a fuse, you light it. Well, if you have a bomb and a fuse, and you light the fuse, you can say that bomb has exploded. It's already gone off. I mean, it hasn't. It still has to burn, but once it's been lit, you better get out of the way. There's nothing you can do about it. So he says that the distance between the point you lit it and here, which explodes in our analogy, then each one of the pieces the string has to burn through. That's true, but we consider it already burned because it's been lit, and it's going to happen. So that means that the individual karmas are, dealt with comprehensively. There are other ways to deal with karma that are not comprehensive, through gyan, through karma itself, or varnashram dharma, doing good karma, for example, to do away with bad karma. But those are not effective in the full sense of the term, eradicating the karma. But bhakti is still, it will take some time. And there is parabdha karma and there's aparabdha karma. So karma that's already manifesting, and that which is not manifesting, is not manifest yet. Sometimes it's said the parabdha karma is immediately changed. But that would be the most difficult to change because it's already manifest. But there's a statement, for example, in the Bhagavatam that says, well, Namadeha Shravananu Kirtanad, that simply immediately by chanting Hare Krishna, one becomes qualified to perform Vedic sacrifices. That would indicate that your karma, which did not qualify you for performing Vedic sacrifices, which is the karma of a Brahmin, that, well, although you did not have the karma for that, by chanting, your parabdha karma has changed, and you have the qualification for that, and more. So that's speaking about bhakti's capacity, which is unique in the sense that gyan and yoga, gyan can, because avidya, ignorance, is the root of all our karmic problems. Well, gyan is the opposite of ignorance. So gyan can uproot the ignorance that's the root, and that way it'll do with all the aparabdha, unmanifest karma. But gyan is not powerful enough to deal with the parabdha karma, which has to just expire in its due course. But bhakti has greater efficacy, so it can change the parabdha karma, is the idea. your prarabdha karma, it says that you're the daughter of so and such and such. But by bhakti, that will change, as we just said. You're going to get another father and mother, right? So that'll happen in bhava bhakti. So it will happen. It's happening, but it will take a little time. Sometimes it's said that the karma, the prarabdha karma, is changed by the influence of bhakti, and it's going away by consistent, practice of bhakti, but it's altered in the present so that what would have happened didn't happen, but something happens. You would have got run over by a car, but instead you just heard the horn and got scared and got out of the way, or something like that. Sometimes it's spoken of like that. So at any rate, the point is that the power, the capacity of bhakti to eradicate karma exceeds that of any other method, and it's comprehensive. And if you look at it from a more immediate personal perspective, it may be taking a long time. Someone who has a broader perspective on time will see, oh, it's over. It's just nothing to worry about. But so it depends how you look at it. How does karma get in the way of us attaining prema? The first thing that bhakti does is cleanse the heart, right? So before you get prema, first the heart will have to be cleansed. It means other desires will have to be retired, and so on and so forth. So bhakti's there doing that kind of work, gradually retiring other desires. The sadhaka day is said to be kind of a sometimes it's the senses are used in relation to sense objects for the pleasure of the senses. Sometimes the sense objects are used by the senses for the pleasure of Krishna. So that you have to go more. The sadhana is all about the latter, and gradually retiring the other. So it's a work in progress. The more we avail ourselves to bhakti, sadhusanga, and so on and so forth, and the more the karmic influence, the material influence of the Maya Shakti will diminish. It's like, okay, you've got you're in the night, the shades are pulled down and the sun comes up, and you can see a ray of sun coming through. You need to pull up the shades, gradually. It's going to take time to pull up the shades, but once they're all the way up, the sun will fill the room, something like that. So does that help?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Another question?
Yes, Krishna Das.
Dandava pranams. Good morning, Guru Maharaj.
Okay, I've taken a long time to answer, so make your question concise.
Okay. Yeah.
You need practice there.
So my question ultimately boils down into is the practical application of ajata-ruci raganuga sadhana for a neophyte any different from vaidhi-bhakti in and of itself, other than the aim of the two being different? Are there any distinguishing characteristics between the two with regard to their practice? Yeah, like aside from their aspiration or goal?
Not really. But that's a big difference. This difference between the aspiration or the goal to attain in ajata-ruci sadhana bhakti of the raganuga type is golok. Instead of Vaikuntha, it's love and intimacy rather than in regards to the in awe, in regards to the majesty of the God. So there's a big difference. But otherwise, so you'll chant, and hear about lilas of the Bhagavatam and so on and so forth. So those things will be there. The hearing and chanting will be different in terms of what you hear and chant about. But that's more or less saying the same thing, that the goal and the ideal and so forth is the only thing that's different. That said, there's going to be some kind of there's a difference in terms of learning the tattva, the siddhanta of the path, and so on. But it's just not. Again, it's not. You're going to chant, but you're going to chant about this rather than that. So there's not really any difference. Sometimes, in fact, ajata-ruci sadhana bhakti is referred to as vaidhi-bhakti. But again, the goal in this case is significant in terms of the difference. Another question?
Guru Maharaj, can I make a comment?
Somebody who had a comment?
Guru Maharaj, yeah, I was wondering if I could just mention one thing. Oh, it's kind of a question also.
Can you hear?
Can you hear me?
Kamarj?
Pardon me?
Can you hear? I think it's Guru.
No, I didn't hear it.
He can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Let me.
Can't hear me?
To do the English thing.
Yeah, right.
Okay, Guru Maharaj, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, sorry about that. So my question, or kind of like a semi-comment, is: wouldn't you say though that the kirtan is different? Because, like, if you chant for Narayan, you're not going crazy and jumping up and down like the devotees do. So would that be a difference between the ajata-ruci and the vaidhi-bhakti?
Well, I think that not necessarily. I think that maybe what you're thinking about is how in other sampradayas, the Sankirtan they also may do Sankirtan. I've told a story, you're probably thinking of that one, how when I stayed for some time in Lakshman Jhulan in the Himalayas, and we used to go to the Satyanarayan temple there, Lakshmi Narayan, and they would do kirtan at night, and they would chant verses from the Bhagavatam and so forth. It just happened the nights I was going, they were chanting verses from the Bhagavatam about Mahaprabhu from the 11th canto, verses that are interpreted by our Goswamis to refer to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But we did Sankirtan, and they thought it was like, whoa, that's really different how you guys are doing that, it was unique. And I remember when we installed the deities at Nrsingamar's ashram, at that time it was in one town in South India, I forget, Padmanabh Kshetra. He had a temple there at one time, and he invited these Madhva, I think they were Madhva Brahmins, to do the puja and so forth. It was very elaborate, very technical. And then when it was completed, it was very beautiful too. When it was completed, we did Nam Sankirtan, dancing in typical style and so forth, and brought the deities up onto the altar, and they were like, "What the heck is that?" And it was kind of a response. In Jagannath Puri, I've told the story many times of how on the rooftop of the temple, the king was there with some others gathered, and the associates of Mahaprabhu were coming from Bengal and doing Sankirtan along the way. And he said, what kind of religion is it? What kind of practice is this? And I think Gopinath Acharya said this is Chaitanya, what is it? Chaitanya Shrishti, Prem Sankirtan. It's the invention, the creation of Chaitanya. It's called Prem Sankirtan. So yes, you're right. In that sense, it is different. The kirtan of Mahaprabhu, the style of it was revolutionary, and even other Hindus were complaining about it, thinking it wasn't appropriate to chant the names out loud like this, and what's with the musical stuff and the dancing in the street. So you're right about that. It's different, but it's different how he expressed it. I mean, the difference being, you could have more sedate, kind of kirtan and so forth. But yeah, Mahaprabhu's style is unique, and his incorporation of simple instruments of the kol and the kartal, as far as we know, during kirtan, he included. So it was unique. There are some unique styles within, Gaudiya Kirtan of Narottam and others that have been handed down over the ages. So there's a little bit of a difference there. Thank you for that.
Ganga Shakti.
Hari Bol, Guru Maharaj, pranams.
Hari.
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. My question was about the manjaris and their role in the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, because unlike the gopis, they don't seem to be explicitly described in Bhagavatam. So I was wondering also probably where I could read more about them.
I think that you can infer, and others have, the service of manjaris in Bhagavatam and the Rasa Lila, in the section where the gopis are following Krishna's footprints, and they see another's footprints. Who worshipped him better is the obvious conclusion, because he left us and stayed with her. And the fact that they are Radha's footprints, there are commentaries, I guess I should say, on that section that imply that some were the Sakhis, the friends and manjaris of Radha, who could identify the marks on her feet, that was her. So it's a little bit abstract, perhaps, and you're right in that sense. That the Bhagavatam is not directly speaking about this type of gopi, that type of gopi, and so forth. Those kinds of details can be found, however, in the books of the Goswamis. The role of the manjaris that you're asking about in particular, which is a role of one type of Sakhi-bhav. It's extreme form of Sakhi-bhav. You have, to use less complicated terms, you have Kanta-bhav and Sakhi-bhav. These are the two types of bhavas in Madhurya Rasa that are pointed out by Rupa Goswami. Kanta-bhav means like Chandravali, like Radharani. They're heroines who have a direct loving relationship with Krishna. Then there are Sakhis. So Sakhi means friend. So they're friends of the heroine, who, rather than seeking to be a group leader with one's own friends and have a direct relationship with Krishna, they defer to a heroine who is their friend, and they assist her and they try to facilitate her coming together with Krishna. And through the virtues, if you will, of Sakhi-bhav, of which there are different kinds, the extreme form of that is the manjaris, who are younger and they have extreme dedication to the heroine, in our case, Radha, and their kama, if you will, transcendental kama for Krishna, is more or less suppressed by their friendship and seva to heroine, to the Kanta-bhav of Radha. And so they have a very interesting relationship with Radha, in which their love for Krishna serves to augment their love for Radha. And as such, they they don't have any desire to have direct union for Krishna, even though their bhav is madhurya and their kama is kind of suppressed, but their kama is fulfilled, that aspect of their bhav nonetheless, vicariously, because when the two Radha and Krishna are brought together and so forth, then the Sakhis and they experience the Kanta bhav vicariously. So they have their own bhav, and then what's included within Kanta bhav, arguably, they're also experiencing that. Therefore, it's described as the preferable type of the two. This is for sadhakas, right? And the manjaris are the extreme form of that. So you may know these things, so forgive me if I'm telling you something you already know, although it's good to repeat even for me to hear. But there I'm explaining some, kind of rasa tattva. As far as the actual, and is the role of then of the Sakhis and manjari. So, they'll tend to Radha. The manjaris in particular have a kind of a Sakya dasya kind of a relationship with Radha. They're servants, maid servants of Radha, but they're friendly enough to sit on the same bed with her, sometimes joke with her, and so forth. But they're wholly, dedicated to her, and so they'll have, services like braiding her hair, decorating her, and so forth and so on throughout the day. And so those type of things are described in Govinda Lilamrita, Krishna Bhavanamrita. You can find the role of the manjaris be brought out a little bit more there. The details of Rasa Tattva and Madhurya with Vaidhi-bhakti is all about. There he'll describe different technical terms, and then he'll give an example of it in the lila and so forth. So the different type of Sakhis are mentioned there, their service, what it's characterized by, and so forth. Raghunath Goswami is thought to be the Prayojan Tattvacharya of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. He writes about his experience in Manjari Bhav through a lot of his poems. Vilap Kusamanjali is one that has been singled out, where he's entering into Manjari Bhav, speaking about it, and then writing about it. So these type of books, you can find that more concentrated and direct emphasis on Manjari Bhav. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Kishore.
Pranams, Guru Maharaj. Good morning.
Good morning.
In Bhakti-rasamrta-sindhu, Rupa Goswami mentions the names of the prominent priya-sakhas. And in Jiva Goswami's commentary, he mentions that Dam, Sudam, Vasudam, and Kinkini should instead be understood as priya-narma-sakhas, because they are the very heart and soul of Krishna. And he refers to the Gotamiya Tantra to support this. And so I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I think that what the reference to Gotamiya Tantra is that these four boys are manifestations of Krishna's antakarna, which is fourfold: ahankar, manas, buddhi, and chitta. So no one can go anywhere without those four things, right? So the emphasis there is that if these boys are manifestations of his antakarna, then there's nothing that they don't know about in terms of the Brajalila. That said, so on that basis, then Jiva Goswami is making a comment that in that sense, they could be considered priya-narma-sakhas, who, priya-narma-sakhas, are involved in the romantic life of Krishna, such that his other friends are not, including priya-sakhas. They're not, typically. But and some of them may not even know, about it, so to speak. Now, these boys know about it, his romantic life, and they don't disapprove of it. So they're not outwardly approving of it like a priya-narma-sakha, like Subal or Ujjval, and participating in it, but they approve of it by way of not disapproving of it. And there is an instance that's cited even in Ujjval Nilmani of Sridham. The implication of the narrative or the leelas that he's approving, or you can did I say Sridham? The Sridham, he's a priya-sakha, is approving. So what Jiva Goswami is really saying there is that in that sense that they are aware of, and at least in an abstract sense, approving of the relationship, they could be considered priya-narma-sakhas, but for all intents and purposes, they function only like priya-sakhas because they don't participate in those leelas, only very indirectly. The example I'm thinking of Sridham is that the so-called husband of Chandravali, Govardhan Mala, he was complaining about Radharani, I think Chandravali going to the forest, and implication of which was she must be meeting with Krishna. And you find Sridham's standing up for Chandravali's chastity and so on and so forth, and challenging Govardhan Mala and threatening him, really saying, so many men are going to the forest, so many women are going to the forest, and don't think like that, about Krishna, and if you do, you'll be finished, and something like that. So I think Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has commented, this indicates that he actually approves of the relationship, but it's in a very broad sense. The way in which the approval is anumodana, means sympathetic approval. So that's anumodana bhav is the same thing. The Saki bhav in Madhurya Rasa is full face of anumodana Madhurya Rasa. Priya-narma-sakhas have partial anumodana bhav because they're in Saki Rasa, so it's partial. But they approve, and their approval is extreme in their case. So it becomes empathetic. Well, they to be sympathetic is one thing, to be empathetic is another thing. Empathetic means to actively participate in bringing about a solution to the tribulations, or the suffering of another. So they're active. So that's how to think about that. I mean, only in an abstract sense, they could be considered priya-narma-sakhas because they're privy to those activities, and indirectly they approve of them because a priya-narma-sakha is privy to them and approves of them, but furthermore overtly participates in those affairs, assisting Krishna and Radha. Does that help?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay.
Indra?
Hare Krishna. I actually do have a follow-up to this exact
Can't hear you.
question. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Better?
I can hear you. I can see you. Yeah.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. I actually have I actually have a follow-up to this approval, because you said, okay, they approve, but are there actually gopas who disapprove, or disapproving would just mean that they kind of don't know about it?
Yeah, they don't disapprove, and that's in the full sense, but they're not involved.
Okay.
They're not involved with that. Krishna's separates from them and participates. So there's going to be some gradation of approval and awareness and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Are you still there?
Vidagdhamadava of Rupa Goswami just walking with his friends, and he says, Radharani's on his mind. And he says, Sridham, have you seen Radharani? And Subal says, what are you, crazy? That's his sister. Of course he's seen. So there's a difference between Subal and Sridham in terms of their, and Sridham lowers his head. He's kind of embarrassed. That's his younger sister, who he's supposed to take care of, protect from knaves like Krishna. But Krishna's pretty charming, so he approves, but not officially and overtly. Okay.
Hare Krishna. I actually had a question before that. Maybe it's too late. I don't know, but it's just a very short, not even super deep philosophical question. So in the interview series that Archana City is doing for us, which is so awesome, Shyamananda mentioned that you compiled, or you helped to compile the Science of Self-Realization, which was my first book. So I was just wondering if you could kind of like tell us about the story behind it. Was it when you were back in like LA? Yeah.
Yeah, I was traveling and distributing books at the time, and my friend Ramaswar was very much leading the publishing of the Bhakti-rasamrta Book Trust, and he was stationed in Los Angeles. So because I was out in the field, he would ask me questions about printing, what we might print, what people would be good, and so on and so forth. And I came up with the title, Science of Self-Realization, for that book. I don't remember if I had too much more to do with it, other than discussions of what the contents might be and so forth. I thought that would be a good title. People would pick up on it and so forth. So we talked about that, and there was a big printing run. They wanted to do a large. While we wanted to print all of Prabhupada's books, we wanted to print large numbers of ones that would be more readily distributed. So then I was consulted with regard to that. That's how we came up with the Science of Self-Realization as a new book. And then the first canto of the Bhagavatam, I said we should print that in mass, because Prabhupada wrote the first canto, and he was writing it as if he might not get through that, what to speak of complete the whole task of translating and commenting on the Bhagavatam, because it's such a large text, and he was rather old. So he packed a lot of that into the first canto, the basic philosophy, which in the other cantos he didn't to the same extent. So we printed those, and then we printed the Nectar of Devotion and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which is a condensation of the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita. Bhakti Nectar of Devotion was a summary study of the nectar of the Bhakti-rasamrta-sindhu. So I was involved, and I was consulted about those types of things. So glad that the book had a good effect on you.
Yeah, definitely. And in the chat, Krishna Kumari is also saying that it was her first book, and yeah, the title is just really awesome. Thank you.
Glad to be helped. So, all right, well, that's it for today. Nice to talk with all of you, and I guess we'll be together again tomorrow at the same time.
Yes.
Jai Nitai.
Thank you so much.
Haribol.
So, dear devotees, just to let everybody know that tomorrow, Guru Maharaj will be back on the call doing a talk for Lord Nityananda's Parents' Day. So we'll see everybody back here tomorrow at the same time, which is 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. So look forward to it. And I didn't get the list of all the classes, but there's classes going on every day during the week at 11:30, and they're all listed on Sri Chaitanya Sangha page, so on Facebook. So you can see who's speaking and what classes are going on. So thank you for all the wonderful questions, devotees, and we'll see everybody tomorrow.
Wait, I have a question. Can you hear me?
I have a question, yes.
Okay. I meant to text you this morning. Do you want me to host tomorrow since you hosted today?
You know, I actually asked Sakyarati if she could do it because I didn't think you would, you know, I know that you had in the past said that the classes were a little long for you to do. So I had asked her.
Okay, that's actually great. I was kind of worried. I was like, oh no, I hope Archuna's like not doing too much. So I'm glad that you asked her. Okay, that's fine.
I just thought that, you know, spread the wealth out here, you know.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think that's good.
You did
Cool.
a 3-hour class. They did the memorial last week, 3 hours. And I was like, oh, Rodney needs a break.
Yeah, I'm pretty tired even still, but okay, cool. I'm glad that that's taken care of. And